Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's learning series. I'm Leslie Burkus, Executive Director of the Urban and Community Forestry Society. We're really happy to have you here today. We've got a great topic because here at UCFS, we see you as the leaders. You are the leaders of urban forestry. You have Jamie King here, who is going to speak to us more about that. And so we have plenty of time to hear from Jamie. I'm going to present my screen and share a little bit more about UCFS, and then I'll hand it over to Jamie when we're ready. So let me get things clicked here. Jamie, you let me know when you can see my screen.
All good.
Okay. Well, welcome again, everybody. Really great to have you here for this month's learning series. Again, I'm Leslie Burkus, Executive Director of the Urban and Community Forestry Society, and this is our monthly learning series. At the end of this, I will share a little bit more about our upcoming ones, but every month we offer this for our members and non-members to help you feel more confident in your role as urban forester, city forester, whatever your role is to take care of trees and communities. This is here to help you feel your most confident, help provide CEUs, and help, again, just bring us all together in this world of urban forestry. We really thank Bartlett Tree Experts as our exclusive learning series partner. Together with Bartlett, we share the goal of raising the bar for urban forestry, and we thank them for their continued support. And we thank all of our sponsors, Bartlett Tree Experts, Davie Resource Group, and EOC for their partnership to help make this possible. And of course, you as members. Our members help make this type of thing possible, all of our programming possible. Together with 2,100 members from across the globe, we are making our voices stronger and helping raise the profile of urban forestry across the globe. So thank you to our members. So we're kicking off right now with an introduction to UCFS. Then I'll be kicking it over to Jamie King. Jamie is with American Forest, and he will discuss how you recognize your unique role within urban forestry, engaging community through inclusive and participatory planning. It's always so important to know how people are responding to trees in our community, and mobilizing the power of many to amplify impact and drive action. The more voices we have, the more attention we can bring to trees in our communities, and Jamie will cover that. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, and at the very end of this, I will drop a CEU form for you to be able to submit for ISA CEUs. As we get started here, I would love for you to drop your name and where you're from in the chat. It's so fun to see where everyone is joining us from, so please do that. The webinar is being recorded, and we will post to our YouTube page afterwards, and that all of our learning series are posted to our YouTube page, so you can check in on those later. Again, CEUs will be, the form will be put in the chat at the end. We will submit those on your behalf, and then you can check your ISA account to see when the CEUs are posted. And finally, you are on mute, but as questions come up during this, please feel free to put them in the chat. At the end, we can bring you off mute as well if you want to ask questions of our speaker. So with that, if you are not familiar with the Urban and Community Forestry Society, our role is to build the confidence, competence, and camaraderie of all professionals who manage trees and forests to create and sustain more livable communities. Breaking that down further, what we really mean is that we are the professional membership home for people who make and support daily tree planting and care decisions at communities across the globe. Just like doctors, nurses, lawyers, engineers have a professional society that brings them together, this is the Society for Urban Foresters. You are in a fast-growing profession, one that is needed more than ever. And with that, we want to make sure that we are your hubs, that you have all the information at your fingertips to plant healthy trees, make trees grow, work with your elected officials, everything that might come up when you're dealing with your busy job as an urban forester. To do that, we provide several resources for members and friends. Our City Trees publication comes out every other month. Hopefully you have checked that out. It's a great resource for technical know-how, personal interest stories. It's really wonderful to be able to share maybe with your boss or friends and family who aren't quite sure what you're doing every single day. Be a great resource to share with them. We have a mentorship program, Arborist Exchange, our annual conference is coming up, and then these learning series. Just a few things that we offer to help, again, you feel you're most confident in the role you do every day. Speaking of our conference, it is coming up on November 17th and 18th in Henderson, Nevada. We are currently having calls for proposals, and I will put that link in the chat. If you have something to share, the whole theme is what works and what doesn't in urban forestry. We often hear the wonderful stories about how things work, but it's nice to hear some of those lessons learned from the challenges as well. So we really want to hear those from you, tease those out a little bit more. I'll share the link, and if you've got a story to share, we would love to hear that at the conference in November. Next, I hope if you are a member, you have gone onto our membership hub. This is our exclusive space for members only to get in there, chat with people from across the country, ask your questions. There's been questions about how to deal with trees and sidewalks, ordinance issues, all that kind of thing that people are able to get on and then crowdsource with people who are doing this, again, across the globe. So exclusive members only. Hopefully you've logged in. And if you're not a member, hope you join soon. Coming up, on April 29th, we are having our first of 3 Career Compass series. So this is for our students, people who are newer in urban forestry, or maybe for some of those who are looking for a new job too. This will be about resume building and interviewing for a job, especially like those panel discussions you might see in a government format, to a corporate perspective as well. We have a great panel of speakers that's coming up on the 29th. In May, we have one on the future of inventories using AI, LiDAR, and smart tree inventories. June, RFP writing with Bartlett Consulting. July, we're still putting the final touches on, more to come from that. And in August, we will hear from Planet Geo on the National Tree Canopy Assessment Tool that was done here in the US. So more to come. I will drop the link for the events. Hope to see you at the next one. And with that, I thank everyone who was a member. You make this possible. Your support of this organization makes all this work that we're doing possible. And we really want to bring you together. We want you to feel you're most confident in the work you're doing, help connect you with people across the globe. So thank you to our members. If you're not a member, hope that you'll join when the time is right. With that, Jamie, I'm going to stop sharing and kick it over to you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Hey, everybody. I'm loving seeing everybody's name and location in the chat. Lots of representation from Canada today. Good to see you all. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Well, we'll jump right into it. Leslie, thank you for the warm introduction. I'm Jamie King. I happen to actually be the current president of the UCFS, so I want to take some time right now to thank you all personally for being engaged with our society for all the reasons that Leslie just shared. This work is hard. This work is important. You're important. And in many ways, we can only really speak to each other about the challenges and the successes that we experience. So in my experience with the society, this connection with all of you is important, and it's been soul feeding and kept me going. Beyond that, I work for American Forests, where we work really hard to cultivate and advance tree equity across the nation. And I know that that's a loaded term, but in reality, I think that tree equity is just best management in urban forestry. It's providing trees and their benefits to everybody. So we're working with people through some of the programs I'll talk about today, and other things to do that hard work together. And today, this isn't going to be a lot of science. This isn't going to be some heavy technical stuff. It's going to be light, and I hope it gives us some clarity on our work and our role in our work. Let's get to it. I'm juggling a couple screens, so forgive me as we do things. Oh, I should mention too, yes, there will be room for questions, and I'm looking forward to that and some discussion, but also we're doing polls. So please, while we're doing that, this session will be a lot richer and a greater discussion if everybody participates in those. But it's also our first time doing that in this format, so there could be a little bit of growing room, so bear with us while we work through those. So today, our discussion is going to center on this idea that urban forestry is change. I think, whether planting and maintenance are going well in your city and your canopy is growing, or if your canopy is shrinking, change is inevitable. For many reasons: development, the climate crisis, the rapid urbanification, the list goes on and on. And beyond the land, your community is in flux too. Demographic and generational change are predictable, but these things can be difficult to respond to on a human timeline, which is why planning is so important. And just as we plan and adaptively manage land and trees, we can and should welcome change among our constituents so we can all work together to cultivate a greener future and help our communities understand the power of trees. That's our jobs, right? But what is your role in that change? Can Today we're going to talk about how maybe we can use our kind of unique positions within our communities to transform the previous paradigm we've worked in into the next one. And so today we'll meditate on that together, and I hope that we learn some things about how we may better serve our communities, because what we do is a public service. So how may we transform our communities into something greater than the parts listed here? So here's the agenda. We'll talk about an idea called the law of the few. We're going to identify our roles, kind of our strengths, where we fit into the puzzle. We'll work together to understand our community's priorities. We'll talk about how these two things apply to our work, to kind of chart the future. And then, like I said, we should have a lot of time for questions and answers. Um, so one way to look at this is a book called The Tipping Point that Malcolm Gladwell wrote. It's kind of, I think the tagline is how little things can make a big difference. And in that book, he makes the case that small actions in our everyday uh, can lead to desired outcomes, and we can advance and shape the future through strategic action. I call that transformation. While he presents several agents of change in the book, I believe the key message and what we'll talk about today is the law of the few, that he concludes that leadership depends on the right people. And we're going to talk about the three roles in leadership that he presents. And you'll see them here at the bottom of the screen. Connectors, they hold relationships. Mavens, they hold information. And in the book, he uses the term salespeople, but I think in our industry, sometimes that applies, but largely it doesn't. And a better term may be persuader. Um, and they actually kind of hold the power of changing minds to inspire others, and they can serve as trusted advisors. So I'll talk for a little bit, and then we'll launch these polls, and I'll ask Leslie to do that when in a little bit. So unpacking each of those roles again, connectors, they hold the relationships that are important in our industry because trees intersect with other infrastructure and also other community priorities. And good relationships can assist with collaboration and help advance missions. Mavens, they keep us up to date with trends and our evolving practice. We all know that urban forestry is advancing rapidly. And if we don't adapt, we quickly become irrelevant. And our knowledge can help build trust among our coworkers or colleagues, but also credibility among our communities. And then lastly here, persuaders fill a role in a sea of competing priorities and personalities. It's the persuaders that help us deliver our messages. And that advocacy is a major component of transformation. And I've found in my own experience that progress follows inspiration. Um, so those are the three, and we're going to talk even more about that. But first, I wanted to get an idea, and I think this could be a fun activity for everybody. About, do you see these roles on your team? So let's see if we can do the polls here.
You ready for me to launch it, Jamie?
Yes, please. So yeah, it's up on my screen. Does your team have these skills or the people to provide this service? And it looks like you can answer the first and then switch over to the next one. Um, do your partners carry any of these loads? Nonprofit partners, city partners, different offices, community organizations, sometimes just good friends. Um, if there are gaps, can you recruit to fill the gaps? Uh, kind of moonshot here. Not is it feasible to do it, but could you craft a role like this onto your team or into a partnership to help meet the needs? And then can you or your team grow into these roles? Can we personally or through leadership of our teams and through partnership actually learn to grow into these roles that may not come naturally? So I've submitted my answers and I'm seeing the bar charts move. This is fun. We've got 38 responses to the first question, 38 to the second, 38 to the third. All right. Well, let's talk a little more while we see if anybody else is waiting to submit their answers. Overwhelmingly, it seems that, oh, okay. Let's see. Can I pull this onto this other screen? I cannot. Oh, thanks for somebody dropping in the chat that not everybody can do the polls. So sorry about that, everybody. Um, so what I'm seeing is that 85% of everybody that was able to participate in the poll, so that's the majority, we'll say that, think that their team is complete. About 15% do see a gap. 80% think that their partners carry some of these loads. 20% say no. This one's interesting. Can you recruit to fill these gaps? 55% say yes. So that's split, but still, 56% no. And then, 90% think that their team can grow into these roles. That's really telling. So 43 people participated. Thank you to those that could, and I'm sorry for those that couldn't. We've learned something today. But generally, yeses. So we'll move on to the next section here. So now that we have those first impressions, and it was generally positive, the growing teams question is telling, and I hope that we have some time to discuss that at the end of the call. But here we have the chance to talk about each of these roles a little closer. So I'll ask some questions, and then after we go through each of these three roles, we'll do another poll to see how everybody personally identifies. So are you the person on your team that people come to when they need to know somebody's name? Do you find yourself making a lot of introductions? You may be this person. You may be a person that connects people to people. You're the person that put us in touch with each other and the rest of the world. Or Are you the person that can't stop reading the entire menu at the restaurant, or loves catching on to trends and then sharing them with other people? Um, are you the person that people come to when they have a question about best practice? I had a question the other day is, do you still use the term crown cleaning? No, I don't. But some people still do. So mavens are information specialists, and they really enjoy finding knowledge and then sharing it. And they help connect us all to changes. They hold expertise. Or are you an energetic person? Do you, I like the one on this is, are you a good, can you seduce people? Do you find yourself telling jokes, remembering jokes? Well, maybe you're a relationship specialist. Maybe you're charismatic and you're good at building relationships. Um, maybe you can fill the role of motivating and inspiring other people. But before we launch the poll on this one, I wanted to share kind of my own experience with this, and it kind of goes back to the Municipal Forestry Institute. And many of you may remember that, or if you haven't had the opportunity, Leslie talked about how to join for the next MFI or one in the future. But mine was in 2018, and at that time in that course, we completed a personality test, and I confirmed what I think I already knew, which is that I am a director. I don't mind telling people what to do. But also, I scored really highly as a persuader, which wasn't a surprise either, because I like kind of the challenge of changing people's minds. But given those two things, I also kind of struggle with like my identity, my personal and professional identity is that of a maven. Like, indeed, my skills and knowledge that I've worked so hard to build uh, are what I think gives me credibility when I'm directing, or leverage when I'm trying to persuade somebody. And I think that that's true for a lot of people, that in reality, in our lives and in our professional work, we hold a lot of strength in many different areas. But for the sake of this poll, and Leslie, if you don't mind sharing that now, what I'd like to see in the room, how many, like, which of these roles do you think you most align with? And we've got the results coming in live. Everybody, you can see it in the chat now. Pretty heavy on persuasion, almost even with connecting. This is fun to watch. 36 responses so far, kind of evenly split between connecting and persuading, and mavens are catching up. That's actually surprising. I My hypothesis was that many of us may identify as mavens first. Hmm. So right now, persuaders hold the top point. 17 responses, that's 40%. Really interesting. Thanks everybody for participating. Now we're gonna do, this is, when we started the webinar today, we actually trialed this, and it's gonna be a little more complicated than I thought. But I thought, now that we know kind of what you thought of your teams, and now that we know kind of what you think of your own roles, I thought it would be neat to try to list our priorities, our community's priorities first, our team's priorities second, administration, the people we work for, the people we work with, but also nationally. And we only chose 4 categories here because just for simplicity, there's a whole lot more priorities that we can all acknowledge, right? But if you had to rank these priorities, top most important to your community to least important, how would you do that? And then we'll do the same for the other 3 audiences too.
Jamie, could you
Leslie?
say a little bit more about what you mean by each?
Sure,
Like, what does
absolutely.
the impact mean, best practice?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So tree equity, we talked about that at the beginning of the session, as providing trees and their benefits to everybody. Sometimes prioritizing underserved communities over those that are already well served. Capacity building, I think that's all too familiar with all of us because our work is largely unrecognized and underfunded. Impact, I think of that more as kind of the utility kind of paradigm of our industry. Many different urban foresters across the nation are responding to requests, and they are measured by their communities and their administrations based upon those requests and how well they're met. And oftentimes that impact in others is the way that we report success or not. And then best practice. Are we holding our teams to ANSI standards? Are we in alignment with the SFI, urban and community forestry standards? Are we striving to meet those? Um, I hope that kind of unpacks each of the categories as we rank them. Great. So the polls are live now, and we can move them up and down from most important to least important. All important, but if we had to choose how these different audiences see these aspects of our work, how would we rank them? I know this has taken a lot of thought from myself, and I appreciate you all contributing, helping me kind of see it from different angles. So far we've got 29 responses, and for the first one, tree equity, capacity building, impact, and best practice in that order. I tried to change these polls so I could actually rank them, but that hasn't that wasn't an option. So I think we'll have to just rank the top responses by category. So for community priorities, tree equity was number 1. For team priorities, it's actually impact. Followed up closely by best practice, capacity building, and tree equity. Very interesting. Then administrative priorities. Impact is number 1. Tree equity after that, equal to capacity building, and then best practice is last. And then nationally, this is going to be interesting. Tree equity and impact are almost even, but tree equity won. Fascinating. And we'll have more time to talk about these results at the end. Thanks to everybody that participated in that. So now we know who we are. We did that activity. And who we think we are and who's on our teams. And we've thought about our community's priorities and kind of the framework that we work in. Let's think about how connectors, mavens, and persuaders might approach those priorities. So people pursuing tree equity might start with cultivating partnerships through connection, and they may report data using the tree equity score tool or other ways of turning data into stories. And they may prioritize speaking for marginalized communities and persuading others with the voices of the voiceless. For folks building capacity, they may try to bridge the gap between problems by harnessing the connections that they hold. They may drive decisions with information from a maven, people that hold that information. And they may negotiate with other competing priorities through persuasion. And when we strive for maximum impact, we may work hard to hear from every constituent and partner through connecting, hearing their voices. We may comprehensively report the results and associated perspectives collected by mavens on the team. And we may try to tell our stories effectively and persuade our leaders. And if we're striving hard to meet best practice, we might connect with other professionals to learn from their experience and the science and knowledge they hold. Or we may mentor our teams and develop better knowledge and skills internally and externally. And we may attempt to convince others to follow best management too. But as I worked through this, and today's really enlightening too, looking back at all of these diverse priorities in our worlds, it's kind of easy to see that some of them may be barriers to others. They're all connected, aren't they? And they all require connection, information, and communication. Indeed, in the center of the screen here, you can see American Forest has created what we call the pathway to tree equity. And each of those steps is interconnected with impact, with capacity. It's all part of one larger system. We must have capacity to do our work well, and we must focus our efforts on results to actually achieve tree equity. So maybe it's all connected, and we have to embrace our role in public service as leaders. And maybe that service requires us to grow and learn, and also invite others to the table to carry some of these loads. I saw in the questions of when people registered for this session, many folks wanted to know, well, how can I engage with communities when I don't have big partners to help with that process? And what do we do to communicate the benefits of trees when how we talk about the ecological services they provide has fallen flat in many cases? And I think a way to look at those questions and others, is by thinking about our work as service leadership. So even if these three types of people that Gladwell presents are conjecture or don't align with your own personal or professional experience, I believe the point is valid and one that is actually uniquely applicable to our work. Our practice, it's multidisciplinary and it's particularly intersectional. Trees are where our specialties and our allies' talents and our constituents, their well-being, their success, the quality of their lives, it's where all of those things intersect. And we as leaders, we have to bring all of those threads together and fill any of the gaps, either through professional growth and training on our teams or through collaboration by actually reaching out to folks who have these skills and cultivating relationships with them and pulling them into the fold because they can bring something that we don't necessarily have otherwise. And I think that's part of service leadership. One of my biggest takeaways from MFI, like I alluded to earlier, is that to best serve, we have to be flexible. In fact, back then they had this Gumby doll that would be part of every MFI session to remind us all to be flexible. And kind of in action, that means as leaders, we have to fill the gap at the table or on the team ourselves, or by actually recruiting somebody to fill those roles, to bring their special perspective and their skills and knowledge. So is your team internally and externally connected? Well, if not, maybe you need to meet that need and lead that effort or take direction from another strong leader in your community. And it doesn't have to be somebody at Public Works or at Parks. It could be a community organizing group. It could be a neighborhood organization. Maybe they have the same priorities that you do. Is the community well informed? Are you meeting that need? Or is there an expert on your team that everybody else goes to keep up to date with new knowledge? Even if the team is strong and well informed and well connected, they still need somebody to advance the mission and to persuade others to buy in. And what we learned today is that many of us actually identify as those storytellers, they're persuaders. But if that's not the case, maybe somebody else in the community can pick that role up. So service leadership, at the end of the day, I think that's our roles. And it could be through filling these roles or through trying to actually spread the word and make our teams bigger through outreach and connection with people across the community or even outside the community. And so it's our job to recognize those things and then work to try to lead a path through. Either way, if we're going to provide the benefits of trees to everybody and achieve tree equity, we must transform our communities into something more than the sum of their parts. And I think that's a worthy goal. And I think that it can be achieved through hard work and through connection and through staying up to date with best practice. It's all connected. Wrapping up here, I wanted to share some of American Forest tools that may be helpful with this sort of work. These QR codes will take you to websites to see these tools. The first one on the left here, that's the Community Action Guide. It's a step-by-step process for reaching and empowering people in your community. In fact, that's kind of a tool for connection. It can kind of serve as a way to fill that role. The one in the middle, that's the tree equity score, where you can actually visualize the places in your community and others that need trees the most. That's information, isn't it? So like something a Maven might provide. And then the one on the right, that's the Tree Equity Handbook. That's a work in progress. The first 3 books are complete and accessible, and we're working on the next 3 right now. But these are tools that you can actually share with your constituents and other partners so they can kind of pick up the ball and do some work on their own without your assistance or even with it. In fact, this tool can help us persuade people to join the movement alongside us. And then if what we talked about today was interesting to you, American Forest is launching what we're calling the National Tree Equity Coaching Network this summer. You can follow that QR code to register. And this is an effort to bring us all together into a community of practice across sectors, across disciplines, to review and meditate on case studies that show the power of our work, but also put us all in touch so we don't feel so alone. So I invite you to that, and I hope that you do register because I'll see you there. And then this is the first announcement of this. This is the same QR code as it was on the other screen. Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass and the Serviceberry and other things, has agreed to launch our coaching network on June 24th at noon. So if you want to join us, free, all of this is free, to hear what Dr. Kimmerer thinks about tree equity and how reciprocity and gift economies, how biocultural restoration all apply to our work. I invite you to that. It's a really special opportunity. I'm looking forward to a lot. And now we have time for questions and answers.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate that. As we're wrapping up, again, we'll drop the CEU code at the end of this webinar. And if you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A button across the top of the screen or use the chat. Hopefully the chat works for you. I think if you're in a browser versus the Teams app, sometimes it can act a little bit different. So feel free to drop any questions as we get started here. Jamie, as you were going through that, I really appreciated your thought of like thinking about who we are personally, or maybe who's on our team, and then also like what we feel our team's priorities are. So maybe in your city forestry department, or maybe on your nonprofit team. And then thinking what your administration's priorities. Your mayor might have set a million tree goal or something like that. So they're looking for impact, where you might be looking for one of the other best practices, and knowing that you can't keep up with all the tree watering that they want for their million tree impact, or million tree planting. So as people are thinking through that, I wondered about kind of grounding this in either your experience. I don't think you shared this, but you were the city forester for Roanoke, Virginia. And I live in Des Moines, and I'm thinking about our city forester here, who has got one team member and then a forestry crew, and then has a nonprofit partner in the city as well, who can help fill some of those roles. So it's kind of a little open-ended. I'm curious, maybe you could start in your role in Roanoke, if you have an example of something you were trying to get passed in the city, and who you pulled in to help fill those roles when you needed them, because you knew your capabilities, or you just needed that extra person in your back pocket.
Love that question. Thank you. And so Roanoke was interesting, and I think I'm in Chicago right now. I was meeting with the Chicago Urban Forester, and they were this morning we had coffee and we talked about how urban forestry has been and how we see it now. And in Roanoke, the program was started in the 90s by a former utility forester, and they had built the program and the system and the plan and the team all in the same modes as utility forestry. And that fit really well with the city's public works department. You intake requests, you output resolutions. So when I was training as an arborist, I saw that system and I thought, well, there's a lot more to our work than that, isn't there? And what I found was there was already a local tree storage group, and they were eager to be more involved than just, I say just, they were providing tree pruning services on young trees and other essential things. But they wanted to plant trees, and they wanted to advocate for the program, and they wanted to do all of these things. So what I found was, through simply meeting with them and seeing where their work aligned with what the city was doing, all of a sudden we had a stronger partnership. We had a bigger team. We had more leverage than ever before. And as that group mobilized and started a nonprofit and started planting trees, well, all of a sudden, the city, who had slashed tree planting replacement from the budget during the 2008 recession, well, 10 years later, when the nonprofit was shining light on that fact, tree planting resumed and was all of a sudden budgeted again. So that partnership delivered the same message that the urban forester had been delivering, uh, but was more successful because they weren't the same old voice uh, that was asking for capacity, that was struggling to report impact, that was kind of blind to the inequities. That community group was able to provide a lot of perspective.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I'd be curious if anyone else in the room has had that experience with a persuader or someone who's providing some information, because in the US, and I think overall, your role as the city forester, government worker, you cannot advocate or lobby for your things that you need. Maybe to some extent you can by providing education. You can always provide education to your mayor or city council. Hopefully they connect the dots for what's needed, but having those persuaders is really important. And I'm curious if anyone has experienced that in the room. And I certainly saw that from the nonprofit. I previously worked at Trees Forever, the nonprofit, worked very closely with our city forester. And I really wanted to play that role for our city forester for things he could not say to city council. Be the advocate, say those things that were the hard things and push our city council further and harder than he could himself, and seeing us as like dual engines of a plane to really get things taken off. Um, Jamie, I don't know if you have comments to that, but as I'm looking at the questions here, there's a question from Taylor: recommendations on how to work with community groups when they have been publicly critical of the organization.
That's touchy. And I think it's something that people are facing all over. I think the first thing is that you have to admit fault, and you have to. What I have found is that the term silo is overused, and but it's true that it from our perspectives as urban foresters who know that even if we plan to do those Elmer ash treatments, if it rains or if we have a storm, those are going to be delayed. And that, boy, I hope we can get it done during the right window, but we may not because our capacity is so limited, and that the logistics of it are so touchy. Well, that message is hard to deliver to someone who doesn't understand the nuances of those programs. The same is true about tree replacement. If I remember, we in Roanoke, we got a lot of flack from the public about the pear trees downtown, and at that time the urban forester had responded with, "Well, if you want better trees, I need better planting pits." Well, that's not necessarily the best answer. Maybe we need to explain all of the different nuances of that challenge and what it would take to do it better, and then establish a timeline together. Ultimately, what I'm describing here is communication. It's asking not for forgiveness, but for understanding and maybe forgiveness, and saying, well, if you want us to do better, here's how we can work together towards that instead of being critical of it. Um, it's building a relationship that's based on something more than a transaction. If they're critical and disappointed, then that's because they expected something. And if you're not meeting that need, I think it's important that you be able to share those details in a way that it's helpful for them to understand the limitations on what we do versus just "I'm sorry." Uh, that's what I think.
Yeah.
I really
Um,
do want to hear from other folks today, though.
Yeah, feel free to raise your hand. We can bring you off mute. I'm not sure, Taylor, what you're experiencing there. I've seen this myself with some groups here in the US where the nonprofit partner has been pretty critical of the city government for things they're doing, issuing report cards that rate the government very low on what they're doing for trees. And that's hurtful to the people who are working within the city government context, because they're doing the best they can, or maybe maybe you do have some people who are kind of stuck in their ways, and they're just not pushing as much as you would like. So I think maybe some of what you were saying there, Jamie, was almost like keeping the core goal in mind. So I think you got to admit your feelings are hurt, or your ego has been damaged, and those are valid feelings. And one of my operating principles is ego is the enemy. And so trying to like when am my ego being hurt as opposed to the big goal that we're all working towards? And you frame that nicely of saying, maybe you're almost like, thanks for your criticism now, but let's like get to the ultimate thing. Like, what's the core here and how can we all stay focused on that? Easier said than done a lot of times, I know. And sometimes you're just almost, I have seen where you have to wait for leadership change with some of these groups too. And that can take longer to get past when you've got some of those heads butting on things.
Yeah,
Uh,
in reality, we all are striving for the same thing. It's just sometimes we're speaking different languages.
um, I know this is Leslie Gover who asked this question about remaining flexible, and it asks you an interesting question. If you can say this, what do you to maintain that flexibility in your yoga pose? What would be your arborist yoga pose to stay centered and focused? Kind of maybe going back to what we just said. It's very easy for us to sit here and say, "Yeah, just be the bigger person, focus on the goal," but in actuality, that's a little challenging.
I saw it and I love that question, and thank you for sharing that, those thoughts, HV City Arborist. Uh, I I'm a student of adaptive management, and I think sometimes that's a crutch. It's what I learned as a city arborist, and I still rely on it today, which is the concepts of that are well known, but in reality, like I think it's important to think about the plans that are written, the plans that are in our heads, the agreements that we've made with others. Those are goals. The plan has to change. Urban forestry is changed. The land is changing, the climate is changing, trees are growing, trees are dying, communities are changing, and our plans have to adapt to meet those changing needs. Oftentimes our goals remain the same, but the way we get to those goals has to be flexible. So it's remembering that fact and not getting tied to the details. Of course, you have to maintain the details. You have to make sure that everything's on point. But in encouraging understanding among your team or in your own mind, I can get really stuck on something having to be one way. But when I step back and say, well, no, there were three other avenues to get that done. If I had just been more flexible, then that's a lot. I think it's a healthier way of doing it. And then, of course, communicating expectations clearly, and those expectations uh, have to be understood by the group, by everybody, as goals. And how, if we have to change the timeline has to change. We all learned that this year, didn't we? Things were set, things were going to happen. Something happened, and we're adapting. And frankly, it's all going to be good. Um, I hope it's just be adaptive. That's the answer from my perspective.
Well, as we're coming up on the top of the hour, if there's any other questions, please feel free to let us know. Jamie, there was a comment about sharing the resources here, which we will follow up with. I did drop, I think I found the correct links. I did put them in the chat for the community action guide and then the tree equity score tool. Is there any final things you'd like to mention about using that tree equity score tool or the community action guide? Especially in the space of trying to, in the US, again, we've got a lot of people from across the globe who are experiencing different things, but in the US, certainly uh, uh, rapid switch from where we were of focusing so heavily on tree equity and not wanting that to go away, because we know that really just means trees across our cities in equal parts and making sure everyone has those benefits to trees. Any tips for people using those tools or resources and guides?
I think the key to the use of those tools and others is to recognize that they are tools and that it's going to take work to get it done. I think oftentimes the tree equity score website is really slick, and it gives us a tool to better present the data that we know to others. So we know through our practice where the communities that don't have trees are, and we've probably been prioritizing them otherwise. Can you still hear me? My
Yes.
earbuds are messing up. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. But it gives us a visual representation of what we usually know inherently, which I think is really, really interesting. And it tells a story in a way that we may not tell the story. Um, so I think recognizing its strengths can help us use that tool more effectively, and also recognizing that it's important that we still follow best management, still follow the community action guide, and recruit partners in the work, because otherwise it's just data. The community action guide is really neat in that it looks at participatory planning and community engagement through a very holistic lens. But again, caveat being how it applies in your specific community is going to be very different. So it's a rubric, it's a template that has a lot of use, but it's going to be incumbent upon us to put it to its best use. And you know your community, you know the partners that you have, and if you don't, do that work first, and then you can pick up these tools and use them to advance initiatives. And then the tree equity handbook, that one is largely not for arborists and urban foresters. It's for our partners who can assist us. It gives tools. Most of us are either doing that work already or looking at our work through those lenses of tree equity already. But these are tools that I'm hoping to encourage all of us to share with our partners, even those that are maybe not so traditional. Just this year, American Forest has began working with faith-based institutions and environmental justice organizations who don't have the ecological background that we have, who don't have access to the same tools and the institutional knowledge that we have, or even they're not parts of this society. So this is a tool that we can deploy to them to give them a little more perspective and understanding how to work with us better, which I think is really important.
Thanks. Again, we are approaching the top of the hour. I see a question from Cody. I'll ask that in a second. I know some people are having issues with the chat. Can I just blame Teams? I think that's the safe thing to do. If you're in the browser, I think sometimes that causes it. If your government settings are a certain way, sometimes that causes problems with Teams chat. All of the links that I've shared here, I will follow up in an email so you have those. And I will also, the CEU forum, we will follow up with that as well. So you have that in your email after this. So as we approach the top of the hour, I'm going to ask this question. If you have to drop off, feel free. I will put the link for CEU form as we're answering it, and then we'll stay on just a few minutes if our questions go over. And Cody says that I'd mentioned the limited lobbying that city foresters, someone work for state or provincial, you might be working for government, you can't do the lobbying as much. And so asking how you can get your nonprofit, your non-government organization friends to acknowledge this and help with that. And I've got a perspective from my work, Jamie, is working really closely with our city forester in my nonprofit role, but wanted to open this up to you because you've seen both sides now. You're in a nonprofit role now. You work with city government, work for on the board of UCFS. Any comments on that nonprofit city relationship, strengthening it?
It goes back to what we were discussing earlier about communication. What I think, and actually today kind of changes my mind on that. I thought in engaging with this society and the folks that are engaged through this learning series that we would be meeting with folks who feel like they hold skills and knowledge. And in many ways, I think that's still true, but maybe we identify with some of the other strengths even better, where our partners maybe don't have the technical background that we do, but bring other things like connection to folks that we're not already in touch with, or a persuasive ability that we don't. I think somebody in the chat said something about, well, it has to be somebody else asking that question, like a trusted third party who comes in and says the same thing that you've been saying, but is heard differently, right? So, but the root of all of that is that we're all striving for the very same thing. It's just that we hold different bodies of knowledge, we hold different responsibilities, we perform different modes. So it's actually beautiful that we have the ability to work together and fill those gaps, um, and you know meet the same problem from different angles. That's what I think when I think about the differences in how we approach the work. Is that if we have an agreement that what we're doing isn't simply transactionary, that if we trust each other and work together and leverage each other's uh, best skills, then we can achieve something even greater than that result of a transaction. We can transform something into something we didn't even know was possible before.
Yeah, I would say that the same thing for my position at Trees Forever, the nonprofit, working with our city. It was all based off trust and great, go forward trust. What does that mean? What it started for was something fairly small. Myself and the city forester worked together and created a volunteer tree class together where we were training volunteers to care for trees in the city. We worked lockstep on that whole thing, making sure that we both agreed on the curriculum. We co-taught it. Everything was done together. And that built that very trusting, started that foundation for us. So if you're hearing that, maybe there's a way to start small. If the relationship's been damaged with your nonprofit, or it's just not quite there, so something you can work on jointly to help start together and build that. And then the next thing we did together was start talking about how we could do volunteer tree planting together. And that was the next step in our partnership. The city provided forestry staff to come out on tree planting days. I brought the volunteers. So we were bringing things together to make it work. And then by the end, we got an exclusive contract with the city to hire teens to plant water trees across the city with a major contract, multi-year contract to do that work. All I still point to us co-teaching a volunteer tree class together for 20 people at a time led to this multi-year contract. So it really came together and it was based off trust in that way. So Cody, I know it's a big thing nut to crack, no pun intended, trying to get those nonprofit partnerships to work, and something we should sure be exploring more because it comes to mind for a lot of people. Well, Jamie, we are 3 minutes after the top of the hour. This TEU form has been dropped into the chat twice. Hopefully you have seen that now. We will follow up as well. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We will look to see you at the next learning series. Thanks everybody. Bye.